Yeah, I thought you had something missing.
Yeah, well, the microphone is missing because our microphone has failed.
Oh, okay.
That's a problem. We're working right now with the company to find out if we can repair it or if it's no good. And so that's the technology snafus we had the last week was all that. Our Bible study last week, there was no sound. And our Agape Hill Church, there was no sound. And we're on. And our study of the lectionary had no sound. After we did all of it.
Of course.
Yeah. So, anyways, so we are we're going to begin our new book now. Welcome to anybody that's following with us by way of either live stream or the recordings here, and we're going into the Old Testament. I got a hole in the table here. Somebody whacked it good. We're going to go into the Old Testament, one of the Old Testament prophets, what we would call the minor prophets, and sometimes they're called minor prophets because they're focused just on one specific judgment of God. Sometimes they're called minor prophets just because their books are smaller. So we would have the major prophets would be Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, that. But then you get into the minors, and of which one of those here is Micah. Now Micah would be considered like a country prophet. He would be like one of those country pastors out there, and he was in He was in an area called Moresh or Morsesh. I can't even pronounce it. Morsheth, and it's an area. It's a small little country village in Samaria. Remember, we were talking today in church where Samaria is, and understanding that Samaria would be the area of the Palestine that would be in between Judah and what would be then Galilee. It would be what would have been in the earlier Old Testament times would have been known as the Northern Kingdom, right? Do you remember the Southern Kingdom would have been the major tribe in the Southern Kingdom would have been Judah, right? Do you remember the major tribe in the Northern Kingdom?
Was it Levi?
Hmm?
It wasn't Levi, was it?
No. Levi had no. The Levites have no land. Levi, the Levites were all given over to God, so they had no land. So it would have been Israel. The northern half would be called Israel. The southern half would be called Judah. And that would be the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And if you remember, the northern kingdom actually was destroyed and never brought back again. So then it was really just the southern kingdom, and then the northern kingdom became these areas of Samaria and Galilee and all of that. But those would have been in the northern kingdom of the Promised Land. Again, looking at the Promised Land, you can almost see it like Indiana or Illinois. The Promised Land was like a rectangle this way, which, about 2/3 of it was the northern kingdom, about 1/3 of it the southern kingdom-ish. Somewhere in that way. Well,
there's no dividing line though, right? There's no mountain range or
nothing like no geographical boundary. The boundaries would have been made. Well, yeah, there would have been, but they would have been smaller tributaries, things like that would have created the natural boundaries. There would have been specific forests or rich lands or that would have created the natural places. but nothing major, not like a big sea or a river or a major river or a mountain range or something along those lines. So Micah would have been one of these little country prophets. He would have also been a prophet that would have been around the same time as Isaiah. And so we're going to see Micah as Micah's going to have to give lots of bad news to people. He's like, it's kind of like Jeremiah. Outside of this, though, that Micah also, in the midst of bringing a lot of bad news, Micah also brings in some very rich gospel, some very rich promises of God, of the Messiah. In fact, Micah is the one, you're probably aware of this, chapter 5, Micah is the one that actually tells where the Messiah is going to be born. You, O Bethlehem Ephrathah. You are the least of the clans of Judah, yet from you will come the one who is to be the Holy One, right? So we see that with Micah. But here, in the first chapter, which is what we're going to work on today, that first chapter is really, there is no gospel in it. It's all God's law. It's all God's judgment. And even though Micah really is one that is, his message is not just going to be for Judah. It's going to be for both. And it actually will spread past that, and you'll see in Micah's words that through Micah, the judgment is going to come to all of those who are created. And we will see that here early in the text. So I'm going to be taking, I have a lot of notes prepared here, and I've taken a lot of my notes for this study from one of my former high school teachers who has done some work on the book of Micah, Mr. Spouty. And I'm trying to remember which class I had Mr. Spouty for. And it's been so long I can't remember which. I'd have to go back into a yearbook to figure it out. But he was also, as were a number of our teachers at my high school, Wisconsin Lutheran. They're all pastors, and so it wasn't unusual to have them either preaching or in this case, we would have some writings from them. If you remember in Revelation, one of the commentaries that I spent a lot of time using was a commentary by the Reverend Darrell Kautz, and he was one of my religion teachers at Wisconsin Lutheran High School also. And I've also utilized Reverend John Jeske. And Pastor Jeske was also a regular instructor at our high school. He was also at that time a seminary professor in the Wisconsin Synod. Well, same thing here. Luther Spouty is another one that I'll be using notes of his just because I happen to have them. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of break this down and we'll break it in little sections and we'll kind of work with it from there. So does somebody want to read just verse 1 of chapter 1?
The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Morsheth.
You did it much better than I did.
In the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem.
Okay, so this is the introduction to it. It gives us the author, right? And it tells us where the author is from. And as we said before, he is from this little country town of Morsheth, And so that is going to be something that we're going to kind of keep in mind. One of the reasons that he's kind of called a minor prophet, he's just this little country pastor kind of guy. And it also tells us when he was around. And when was he around? He was around during the times of these three kings: Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So these are the kings. Note here that it is, his writing is written really to the people of Judah. They're written to the people of Judah, and we know this because of the fact that they named the Judean kings. They didn't really name the Israel kings, the northern kingdom kings. But he does say in here that this is to which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. And the key to this first verse, and I think that this is really important, is that it says here, the word of the Lord came to him. And so he wants people to know right away that this is God's word, not his. And that is that he wants people to recognize that he is speaking with the authority of God himself. Okay? And there's a reason for that. Because during the time, there would have been many prophets in Israel, the northern kingdom especially, and in the southern kingdom, who were false prophets. They would have been the ones that were misleading people with lies, speaking as if they had authority, but they didn't. Okay? Does that happen today?
All the time.
All of the time. People will be speaking what they say is authority from God, and they never received authority from God. And how do we know that?
Because it's contrary.
Yes.
It's contrary.
It's contrary to what?
Right.
Yes. It is contrary to the word. That's how you know. And so what Micah is saying here, he is speaking to them, but he has the authority from God that these are his words and not Micah's. Okay? They were, now Moresheth is near Philistia. You know where the Philistines would have been? Yeah, that would be, at that time, would be where Moresheth would be. It's near Philistia. And he is going to be proclaiming God's judgment on the leaders of the people of Jerusalem, as well as the leaders of Israel, both. Okay? But also he is going to show God's promise of deliverance. That's what we're going to see throughout this. And to do that, though, is he's going to need the authority of God's word to do it. Now, because it says that he is in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, it means that he would have been active for about 35 years. So his ministry would have been about 35 years. Now the three kings here that we would have Jotham. The first one, Jotham. Jotham was basically a good king for the most part. But what he did that was probably not very healthy is he kind of impoverished his people. And he impoverished them because he would overspend on luxuries and palaces and all of this kind of stuff. So he was kind of reckless with their money, with the money of the people. But for the most part, he was a pretty good king, in addition to that. Was Ahaz a good king or not so good king?
Not so good.
Not so good king. Right. Ahaz was one that not only tolerated idolatry, right, but what did he do is he actively promoted it. He would actually invite those false gods and the rituals into the temples. And that was very dangerous. Now, Hezekiah, anybody Hezekiah? Good, yeah. He was known as the good King Hezekiah. He was a good King Hezekiah because he really did try to transform the people, okay? But one of the problems Hezekiah had is that the moral and social conditions around him had gotten so bad that he was almost in a lose-lose situation. Which is really interesting as you think about it today. Think about the church today. We could talk about, you could talk about pastors being really faithful, right? In the midst of our city, but the moral decay of our city has gotten so bad that the message that they have to speak, for the most part, will fall on deaf ears. Right? Because of, I mean, a great example is think about our text today from the gospel. The woman who was married 5 times and she's married 5 times and she's currently living with a boyfriend, right? She had spent an entire life of adultery in that way, loose sexual morality, all of that kind of stuff. Right? And if that happens in our culture today, it's really, for the most part, not a big deal. Right? Look at how we view, all you have to do is watch your television programs and your commercials. How do we view things like abortions and living together? Some of you are too young, but others of us would probably remember those early days when living together with a person of the opposite sex outside of marriage in the city of Milwaukee was what? It was a crime. Yeah, well, see, it was a crime to do that. Certainly not anymore. Right? So what happens is that as the moral decay comes, now the message that you have to proclaim in the church is really hard to get through to people when all they know is that culture. It's different for some of us that understood the culture before. Where you see the declining of the culture, you find yourself being able to be more steadfast. But then, for others, think about it for younger. They would have never, to them, some of the words that you're speaking fall on deaf ears. I know some pastors, they'll talk about, men and women living together outside of marriage, and the words that'll come out of the word that comes out of their mouth is not proclaiming against it. It would be more along the lines of, well, that ship has sailed the harbor. So you almost have to, it's almost like they're going to deal with things that have become even bigger than that because of the moral decay. So that's what Hezekiah faced, was the decline of the culture. And so he, in trying to be good, still struggled. Okay, so those are the kings of which he fell under. Okay, now because he was the one that prophesied in Judah, he's not mentioning the kings of Israel, and yet that his prophetic vision is for both kingdoms, right? And we know that it's for the both kingdoms because they are identified by their 2 capital cities, Samaria and Jerusalem. So that's really how we understand this. Now, a little background there. Samaria became the capital city of the northern kingdom about 875 BC. King Omri had built this as the new capital city in this area. He selected that site because it was kind of centralized, and he was kind of in the middle of a hill country. In fact, the word Samaria means watch place. So by being up on a hill country and the city, they could kind of overlook the lands, that type of thing. It was about 40 miles north of Jerusalem. That's where you would find Samaria, the center hub, right? And it remained their capital for about 200 years. And it was ultimately destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC. So that is the importance of Samaria, is that town. It was destroyed and it never rebuilt again. Okay? So that kind of gives us a little background of the time and place and the locale of his message. So now we're going to come to the beginning of the message, and what I'm going to ask for somebody to read verses 2 through 4.
Hear you peoples, all of you. Pay attention, O earth and all that is in it, and let the Lord God be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And the mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split open like wax before the fire, and like waters poured from a steep place.
Okay. All right. So these are the first words that come out of us. Now, in the as Nathan read from the English Standard Version, right? I'm assuming that's what that was. He uses the word "hear you people." I really like the NIV here. What's the word in the NIV? Look. You know, the other way, what would be another word that was used for this? If you were going to, instead of the word look. Do you remember? We talked about it a few weeks ago.
Attention?
Behold. Behold. You know, and that's really what he's saying here. And then look what he says. Look or hear or behold, you peoples, all of you. This is, I think, appropriate because what we are seeing here is first the word look, that is showing that urgency. Like Emily is saying, pay attention. But the Lord is coming, and he is urgent. This is urgent, and he is calling upon all people, the earth and all who are in it. O earth, and so this is while it's for Judah and for Samaria, it is also for all people. All people, because he is pronouncing judgment against idolatry. And if there is anything, if there is any sin that would make God madder than any other sin, it would be idolatry. Why would that? Why do you think that?
Because God is here.
Yeah. Because
Nobody.
there's a reason, and we've always used the term, there's a reason why the first commandment is always the first commandment, right? And so we've also learned that every other sin, when you break every other sin, you've broken the first commandment. Because you have put something in front of God. Whatever it is, you put something in front of God. And that is idolatry. What are other words that the Bible will use for idolatry? We'll see it sometimes in some of the Old Testament, maybe some of the prophetic books or the poetic books, all that kind of stuff. What are some other words he uses?
Leave adultery.
Adultery, yes. Adultery. Prostitution. Whoredom. That's who he calls any who are worshiping false idols. He will call you he calls prostitutes, adulterers. Because why? You are cheating on God. It is that's the relationship that he has with you. It's like I would say it's like a marital relationship, but it's better to say that a marital relationship is like a relationship between God and you. It'd be kind of the opposite. It is one of the pictures that we use of marriage is this relationship of a oneness, and that's the relationship that God has with his people. So anybody that breaks that covenant with that bond is considered an adulterer, and really we see it in anything that has to do with idolatry, and so that is why we are going to see him here as he is going to proclaim judgment on his people. Let the Lord God be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. He is going to use, interesting, he is going to use these. So really what he's doing is, it's kind of, in a way like what we will do in our Bible study here. At times we will take the innocent, like Otto or Claudia, and we'll use them as kind of as this picture, as a witness by way of an example. And here, what he's saying, he is using his people also as an example to the whole world of his disdain and his anger toward idolatry. God doesn't call for timeouts when it comes to idolatry. I mean, his anger is great, and he's saying that here. For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place, and he will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And he says, and the mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split open like wax before the fire, like waters poured down upon a steep place. So what Micah is doing here is he's showing that the anger of the Lord is going to get poured out just like a volcano erupts. And when a volcano erupts and the lava comes out and the lava pours down, where does the lava go? It goes everywhere. It doesn't miss it doesn't miss a thing because it's in liquid form, right? It's not like well, there's a little hill or something, it'll go around a hill. No, it'll just kind of it covers it all. It takes. And so he is using this picture of natural disaster to kind of give them a picture of God's judgment. And also, as he speaks about this, he is really talking about not just natural disasters like volcanoes and earthquakes and tornadoes and tidal waves and all those kind of things. But the other thing that he is speaking about is that he is going to be using even his enemies, even those who are against him, to punish the unfaithful. So he's going to use all of creation to punish. In this case, he is going to use the Assyrians to punish. And he's going to use the Babylonians to punish. That type of thing. So, that is not just the natural disasters, but even the enemies. And so this helps us to understand a little bit about the God working in the two kingdoms. When we talk about the two kingdoms, we have the kingdom of the right and the kingdom of the left, and that God is God of both of them. Kingdom of the right. What is the kingdom of the right? Anybody know?
Republican.
The Republican. No. Okay, let's try again. Kingdom of the right. Kingdom of the right would be the heavenly kingdom or the spiritual kingdom. Okay? When we are proclaiming God's word here, we are in the kingdom of the right. Okay? But then the kingdom and God is the ruler of the kingdom of the right. The kingdom of the left is what? It's the earthly kingdom. It's the kingdom of, it would be, again, it's the earth, it's all the universe and all that is of it. So that means it's people, it's natural things, all of them. So it means it means that God is the God of the wind and the rain. God is the God of all people, whether it be, and so he'll use that kingdom of the left to do his work. And there are times when he will use even his enemies, those that are against him, to do his work, to punish his people. Okay? So what we're seeing is him working in both kingdoms there. Okay? So let's go on from there. That's all this is. He is speaking about what he is going to, the punishment he's going to rain down. Let's go from 5 through 7 now.
All this is because of Jacob's transgression, because of the sins of the house of Israel. What is Jacob's transgression? Is it not Samaria? What is Judah's high place? Is it not Jerusalem? Therefore I will make Samaria a heap of rubble, a place for planting vineyards. I will pour her stones into the valley and repair her foundations. All her idols will be broken to pieces, all her temple gifts will be burned with fire. I will destroy all her images, since she gathered her gifts from the wages of prostitutes. As the wages of prostitutes, they will again be used.
Okay. So here now he's going to be using these terms, Jacob and Israel. And when he's using these terms, Jacob is referring to Samaria and the northern kingdom. And Israel is referring to Jerusalem and the southern kingdom. Okay? Because both kingdoms are guilty before God of their repeated idolatry and their transgressions. And so he's going to refer to these sinfulness with kind of like this series of rhetorical questions, that he is going to pose to them. Is not Samaria's the transgression of Jacob? You see, a little history here. You got Jeroboam, which will be the first king in the northern kingdom. He deliberately introduces idolatry into the worship of the true God, and it was to take the people away from the temple and their worship in Jerusalem. And so that's what happened in the northern, to kind of draw them away from the southern kingdom. He would bring this idolatry into the northern kingdom. Right? Well, then we go from there and we would have King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, right? And what do? They degrade the worship even more by bringing in the Phoenician sex gods, the god and goddess, which would be, you would remember them, they're Baal, the god Baal. That's the male sex god of Phoenicia, and Asherah would be the female sex. And so what they would do is they would bring then this temple prostitution into the temple, right? All of this is going on. And so there were succeeding kings that would bring this that would bring this fertility cult into those temples, even to the point where, if you remember in 2 Kings 17, Elijah was saying he was the only one that is left. This is what was going on in the northern kingdom. Okay? Well, then he speaks of the northern kingdom. Now he's also going to speak of the southern kingdom. He said, is Jerusalem Judah's high place? In 840 BC, we see idolatry coming into the southern kingdom by King I'm trying to think of which king. It was Ahaziah. King Ahaziah brought it in. And so he would then bring in, now there was some idolatry there before, but he really brought it in earlier. And then before then, we would have had Solomon. Solomon had some idolatry practices in the temple also. You remember he had the practices, he had 700 wives, all that kind of stuff. So that was going against God. And then there were other kings that would have Baal worshipers and Baal worshiping in the temple, and they would have idols to Baal and all of those kind of things. So the important part of this is that as he speaks here about the kings allowing this to happen, we're reminded that the kings are the ones that were there to safeguard the people from idolatry. This was during the time of, we went from the time of the judges to the kings. The people wanted a king, so God gave them kings, but those kings, they were the ones that, it was different than it is in our United States today, where we have this separation of the church and state. There wasn't such a thing. There the king ruled for God in that place, and it was the religion was a part of the whole kingdom. And the kings would while they were to safeguard the true worship of the Lord, they're the ones that allow the false religion to come in. And so they would be the ones that would be held responsible for it. They are the ones that would be held accountable for it. And so we see that really, if you think about it, if we apply that today, we can apply that in our church toward pastors. We can apply that toward pastors remaining faithful in the Word. Because if the pastor's not faithful in the Word, what happens to the people?
They're not either.
They're not going to be either, because they're going to be hearing this false word. There was an adage, an old adage that went around in the Wells and in the LCMS too. And in fact, I think you still have it today. They will say, as far as the seminaries go, there go the churches. So if the seminaries were teaching incorrect, what happened is those pastors came into the churches, and there would be false doctrine in the churches. And so that's always been the concern with the church body, is that the seminaries are faithful to the Word. Because if they're not preparing men faithfully, it is the people who suffer, right? And so what we see here in 5 through 7 is that all of the judgment that is going to be against Samaria is going to be complete. It is going to be completely overthrown, and we see that in 725. It began, and then 3 years later in 722, it is complete. It is finished, and all of Samaria is destroyed. Now, what we see on the southern king, and that was because the Assyrians came in and they literally just destroyed it. They didn't leave one stone left upon another. Okay?
So was that at the point that the Jews from the southern kingdom no longer recognized the Jews from the northern kingdom?
It would have been after, yeah, it would have been kind of after that.
Because the woman at the well said, our forefathers were Jacob.
They were.
It's Jacob's well.
They were.
So they were
But-
Jews.
Right, but what ended up happening then is as it was overthrown by Assyria, and the people in the northern kingdom continued to connect they began to intermarry,
Okay.
and so the Samaritans would be considered not pure Jews, right? So they would be those Samaritans, and that's exactly what happened. So they would intermarry, and now you would have these individuals that would not be seen, and that's exactly where the hatred came. But the southern kingdom also forgets that they too were overrun. Now, Assyria came into the southern kingdom too. They just didn't completely destroy the southern kingdom here, but God's judgment on them was complete when? After the Assyrians didn't finish the job, the Babylonians did. So you see, it might have been a two-part process in the southern kingdom, but in the northern kingdom, it just was one thing, and it destroyed all of them, right? And so the people of Samaria, they lost all their idols and images. Everything was overrun by the Assyrians, and they were destroyed. Okay? And then we come to 8 and 9. We're going to take just a couple minutes and finish 8 and 9. Somebody want to read it?
The heading is weeping and mourning.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this I will weep and wail. I will go out barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal and moan like an owl. For her wound is incurable. It has come to Judah. It has reached the very gate of my people, even to Jerusalem itself.
Okay. So now as Micah is talking about this impending destruction of Samaria, he is going to be reduced to a pitiful spectacle, is what he's saying. His grief and his sorrow is going to be so great that he describes it in this way, that there is going to be weeping and wailing. He's going to be going about barefoot and naked. Now, he's not really talking about being without any clothes, not nude, but naked means that he would be covered in like sackcloth, right? It's interesting. This is the image that we have of Lent. As we think about what Christ has done for us, we spend this period of time, reflecting on our own sinfulness. Now, we don't wail and weep the way that he did here, but it is still a contrition. It's still a recognition of our sinfulness. And he says he's going to make lamentation like the jackals, and he's going to mourn like the ostriches, and he's going to be howling like one that where the destruction is complete. If you've ever heard in your backyard overnight an animal get attacked, like a rabbit or something along those lines. Did you ever hear the type of howl that they make when they're being killed? This is the image that he's given. He's going to be, his wailing is going to be such that no one will have any doubt that this destruction is going to be complete. And it has come, and what has happened in Samaria is now going to be coming and reaching the gate of his people in Jerusalem. Okay? So this is what he is saying here. And of course, we know that God's judgment comes upon Judah 20 years after the fall of Samaria. And it's going to be in two accounts. One of them first by the Assyrians, and then by Babylonians. And so that is what we're going to see. Okay. So we got to stop here only because and I want to stop there because the next section is a really unique section, and the rest of the chapter is not like anything else in Scripture. And so I want to just show it to you because an English translation cannot fully understand this because you have to look at it in the Hebrew to understand what Micah is saying. Because we can't. It's because it's all puns. It's all puns, the whole thing. So it's almost like a mockery, is what it. And so we're going to need to have the Hebrew to understand it. So we'll do that next week. So go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God. See you next week. We'll finish that up. We'll get into 2. We'll see how far into 2 we get. Maybe we'll get it done